Thank you so much, Noor. It's a pleasure to be with everybody. I'm absolutely thrilled to, be here and talk to you a little bit about how to talk to a regulator, which is not actually as easy as it sounds. To really get us started, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Gabrielle Inzirillo. I'm the head of market development for the Financial Services Regulatory Authority within Abu Dhabi Global Market. I know that is a mouthful, as to say, but I sit within the Financial Technology and Innovation Unit, and our goal is essentially to put together industry initiatives to make sure that the regulations and the guidance that we put out for startups, for companies, for banks, and all that sort of good stuff is in line with industry and what you guys need. Now, this presentation that I'm going to tell you about and I'm going to talk to you about is on LinkedIn, we called it considerations when talking to a regulator. But I wanted to really change that topic a little bit and really make it how to pitch a regulator. Because fundamentally, as a startup, you've been taught how to pitch to VCs time and time and time again. You've probably really refined your pitch over the last few years, over the last few months. You've done it over and over again. You have an elevator pitch, you have a 30-second pitch, you've got a 2-minute pitch. You know how to speak to VCs. But I bet that nobody's ever told you or even talked to you about how to pitch to a regulator. And that's going to be the premise of this presentation. So let's pull up those slides and I will walk you through it. Also, please do keep in mind that after this session, I will be answering questions. So Noor will be able to look at the comments, look at any questions you might have, and relay them back to me. So if you have any question whatsoever, please do drop them in the chat. Cool. Okay, let's get started. So learn to talk to a regulator. Now, I'm just going to tell you just a little bit about myself and my background so you have an idea about why you should listen to me. I know talking to regulators is maybe deeply unsexy and they sound like stuffy people who won't give you much feedback. But before I became a financial regulator and worked within Abu Dhabi Global Markets and Financial Service Regulatory Authority, I actually used to be a VC. So I used to invest in European, EMEA, so European and Middle Eastern, insurtech and fintech startups. And for many years, I spent my time with the startups I invested in and the startups I was helping on the other side of a table with a regulator, right? So we would come because we would have amazing founders, amazing products that needed to be launched, but it was always a little bit difficult to integrate them and to implement them because regulation was there, saying that maybe this wasn't feasible and, customers were a little bit scared of using the products. So I spent many, many hours in front of regulators and I figured out firsthand that it is very difficult to talk to a regulator. So this presentation is to give you those tips and tricks to change your VC pitch into a regulator pitch. All right, let's kick it off. I'm going to start it off by really talking to you about, starting from basics. What is a VC pitch? You know what a VC pitch is, and we're just going to go through it, just a standard model of how you have been taught to pitch as a startup when you're looking for fundraising, when you're looking for money, and when you want to tell the world that you have the most amazing, bright idea in the world. So very standard. You're going to start up with, hi, my name is Gabrielle, for instance. My startup, Gabrielle's FinTech, launched in 2020 to solve XYZ, this fundamental problem. Based on these technologies, A, B, C, and XYZ, you could say based on technologies of artificial intelligence or machine learning or blockchain or new advances in genome production and such, we are tackling this issue in a unique and efficient manner. Then you're going to go into your market sizing. You're going to go, we estimate a current market of XYZ million, or if you're lucky, you're going to be able to bust out the billion number for this product. And we're gaining traction for XYZ new customers over the past XY months. Then you're probably going to talk a little bit about, recurring revenue. But we both know that VCs aren't too attached to ARR. So you don't even need to mention it. Then you go into runway. So we currently have a runway of XY months, and we're looking for an investment of this much million at this valuation in order to scale our operations. You're always going to say that you want to go big, right? We will be hiring in strategic tech and sales roles, or we're looking to use this money to scale in this brand new region. Then you're going to finish it off by talking about your team. You're going to go, our founding team is made up of so and so and so and so with this many experience in the field. We graduated from XYZ universities and we have experience at so and so companies, right? We are looking for a value-add investor with experience supporting this industry, and we'd love to show you a demo of our product, right? Very, very basic. I'm sure you guys have all put that together. You've all seen it. Easy. So let's look at this. Let's look at this pitch in its whole, in its entirety. So you may think you are speaking the exact same language as the regulator in front of you, right? It's the same words. It's all in English or in any other language you're going to talk about. But actually, the words you're using is attached to completely different concepts when you speak to someone who is creating policy and who's creating laws. And those concepts are these. I've highlighted them in red, if you can see. So, problem, technologies, runway, founding team, and years of experience, as well as demo, all that is completely different in the mind of a regulator. So I think ultimately you have to understand, you have to keep in mind that though you may be speaking with the same words, you're fundamentally speaking a completely different language. So let's translate that. What does that actually fundamentally mean? Well, let's kick it off. Technology. Now, if you're in venture capital, if you're looking for money, if you're talking to investors, technology is essentially new technology that is going to give you, as a startup, this competitive advantage over either incumbents, either big firms that you're going to disrupt, or other competitors. So they're looking, okay, how are you going to essentially be better? What is giving you the edge? For a regulator, technology and new technology means, okay, this is new, this is technology, and these might be processes that we do not have rules, laws, frameworks, or guidances in place with at the moment. In fact, we might not understand how to oversee and how to protect consumers from this new technology. So we need to evaluate this new technology to see if either it fits our rules, fits our regulation, and if it will essentially, protect consumers in any case. So it's not so much, competitive edge. It's more, do we have the methodologies and the frameworks to protect consumers from this technology? Completely different ends of the spectrum. Next, problem. Now, in VC speak, a problem is, okay, we're going to prioritize product market fit, right, in order to have a profitable company. Problems are good because if problems are solved, you have clients. And if you have clients, you have a profitable company that is going to be a unicorn and it's going to go to the moon, right? For a regulator, a problem isn't necessarily something that a lot of consumers are going to go in to buy. A problem is potentially a gap in the current market that means that some consumers right now are being left behind. So it's not so much, they not so much care about what profit or how many, clients you're going to sell this to, but they do care. A problem for them is when there are segments of society and segments of people that are being underserved. And if you're saying, okay, this technology and this is going to solve the fact that so-and-so do not have access to good products, music to regulators' ears. But they don't want to hear all about your profit. So keep that in mind. Runway. Now, runway, easy. For a VC, your runway is basically the time to the next funding round. They're going to say, okay, we're going to give you so-and-so million. That'll keep you afloat for 18, 24 months. And then you're going to raise again, right? That's all your runway is. For a regulator, your runway is the time spent essentially where you're unprofitable and you're in a precarious situation. So during that time, you might fail. You might not be able to service the clients. You might not be able to meet up to your financial obligations. It's not a particularly, great time. So they're going to be looking very, very carefully to see whether you're being able to separate, your runway, the money you have from VCs into your operational costs, so it doesn't at all impact your clients. And if fundamentally you do decide that, your startup goes bust, which happens, failing fast is a good thing. How are you going to tell those consumers and how are you going to, finish servicing them in an appropriate manner, right? Next up, we have the concept of team. Now, team, when you talk about team to VC, they want to know, okay, who you are, what companies you've worked at, if you've gone to an elite, university, for instance, because we all know how much VCs love a Harvard dropout. And they're going to be using that industry experience and that elite education or education in general as a proxy for potential success, right? They just want to see, okay, these kids are bright. These people have a really good track record. They have really good experience. They're going to be the ones to be able to solve this problem. Okay, potentially very successful. Actually, for the team, when you're a regulator, it's not so much about what university you went to. It's not so much about, what company you worked at. It's the amount of years and experience spent in that regulated environment. Now, for us, it would be the financial services, but for other regulators looking at other fields, it would be their specific industry. So team is very fundamental to look at who has experience in compliance, who has experience in financial services or any sort of regulated services, how many years, and if they are capable. And if you, as a founder, don't necessarily have the 10 years experience in compliance or the 10 years experience in your industry that will reassure the regulator, you need to show that you're going to be supported by someone, whether it's someone on your board, whether it's someone on your leadership, whether it's someone as an advisor that isn't attached to the operational works. Team, that's what they're looking for. They don't care if you're two kids in a garage at that point. That's not going to help you, and it's not going to excite them at all. And finally, demo. You think demo is really, really easy, right? Demo, okay, let me show you the product. Let me show you what the client sees. For a VC, they just want to see, okay, you move around the screen, what the client journey is going to look like, a client-facing interface, right? Completely different for a regulator. For a regulator, the demo is actually all your backend processes. So it's your backend, know your customer processes. It is your consumer mitigation. It's your fail safes. It's your alert systems. It's your risk mitigation processes. It's what do you do if you find out that one of your consumers could be a, potential money launderer or even a potential criminal or someone nefarious? How do you protect your consumers even from yourselves, from your own employees, if someone might want to do something dodgy? That's what they're looking for. It's all these back-end processes. Nobody really cares about what the consumer sees from the front. It could be a gross looking interface, right? If clients like it, it's not our place to talk about it. That's your VC who's going to talk about it. So now that we went through the translation, and I hope you got those concepts, keep in mind that though I sit within the Financial Services Regulatory Authority, this actually works for any regulated industry. They're all going to be looking at the exact same things. So let's look at what a pitch to a regulator looks like. And let's essentially translate our VC pitch. So it would go, hi, my name is Gabrielle, or XYZ. My startup, Gabrielle's FinTech or Gabrielle's InsurTech, launched in 2020 to solve this big problem. Currently, traditional players do not consider this segment of people a profitable segment. They are being underserved. There is a gap in the market that we can service in a risk-appropriate manner by using ABC and XYZ technologies. We estimate a current market of XY million consumers do not have access to these regulated financial, any such health, whatever you want to put in there, services. We currently have a runway of so-and-so months and have secured this much million investment at this valuation in order to secure our operational costs. We will be hiring in strategic tech, sales, and compliance roles and are seeking to enter XYZ new region. Our founding team is made up of so-and-so and so-and-so. We are supported by our in-house or external consultant compliance officer, and we have named this senior executive with so-and-so years of experience in this regulated industry or compliance to our leadership or to our board. We'd love to show you a demo of our product and demonstrate the soundness of our processes. Small changes that actually fundamentally make a big difference with how your conversation with a regulator is going to go. Because by pitching it and by rephrasing your VC pitch in that manner, you show that fundamentally you get it. You get it what it means to be regulated. With that, if anybody has any questions, please do pop them in the chat, pop them into comments. Noor is now going to be, bringing those questions back to me. Thank you so much.
Gabrielle, Thank you for an absolutely fantastic session. We've had a few comments come through, and I'm really excited to hear your take on them. The first question, Gabrielle, is with a VC pitch, as you well know, it's very easy to get feedback on your VC pitch. You can ask founders who have raised funding, you can ask investors who are in your network. There's a significantly larger number of people in our network who can advise us on our VC pitches versus our regulator pitches. So, who are some of the people that you think that founders can reach out to get feedback on their pitches for regulators?
I think ultimately it doesn't necessarily have to be a regulator that you reach out to, especially since a regulator might not feel comfortable tailoring it for you, right? There's a little bit of as to say conflict of interest sometimes on that front. But if you reach out to anyone with a number of years in a regulated industry, like for instance, as I mentioned, I'm in finance, but your startup might not be in finance. But in finance, you take anybody with 10, 15 years of experience within a bank, right? And they understand what it is to be go under these checks, what it means to have to go through checks and balances, understand the compliance aspect of it. They are there. They just might not be as, I guess, aggressive in the startup ecosystem to be an advisor or not, right? So that's why they're a little bit less accessible. But anybody in these regulated industries with that experience who's had that time, speak to your elders is what I'm saying. They will give you a complete different optic. And keep in mind that when you speak to a regulator, they won't have that same excitement that a lot of the startup ecosystem has with, oh, this is so cool. They're really looking how to, take care of people. So when you do speak to someone with those years of experience, don't think, oh, they don't get it. Because if they don't get it, the regulator won't get it as well. Take it as a learning experience.
I love that. I think it's important to be able to explain our startups and the role that they play to other stakeholders in the market who might not be as excited, but that we still absolutely need the buy-in of. So let me ask you, sitting in your very unique position as somebody who has sat on both sides of the table now, both as a VC and as a regulator, what are the regulated industries that you're very excited about at ADGM at the moment? And what are the areas that you think maybe are not so exciting right now?
I have no idea how to answer that very, very honestly. I think there's a lot of very exciting stuff that's happening, whether it is, for instance, in the virtual assets field. I mean, we're seeing how that's, becoming, it used to be very financial services based with, digital currencies and such. And now we've got NFTs, which are not technically always digital currencies and such. So that's exciting, this swap of virtual assets, and something that ADGM that we do regulate. So I'm excited about that. In terms of other regulated industries outside of financial services, I think what's happening in health is also very, very exciting. We've seen with COVID how important and how quickly you can potentially work with a regulator and get approvals. So I think that could be a game changer in the future. But I think very honestly, that's more of a Gabrielle is excited about this rather than the ADGM is excited about this.
And on that note, what advice can you give founders who are maybe those university dropouts who don't have that many gray hairs, who are thinking about coming and speaking to you guys for the first time? Do templates exist that sort of, when we spoke about considerations early at the beginning, that sort of have keynotes of things that they should think about?
Not so much. Templates do not exist. Keep in mind that every type of rule, regulation, and guidance, all that is publicly available knowledge. You go on any regulator website, any sort of, whether it's an international free zone like us, or whether it is, a country-wide regulator, all of that is online. The information is there. It's just that it can be a little bit intimidating, and you might think, oh, that's the old, it's the old world. We can do things better. We can do things faster. And that is true. But if you fundamentally do not want to go through and read through the rules and read through that, then in that case, you have to speak with a compliance person or an expert or someone in that field. And there are a lot of people out there. It's just that maybe they're going to be, touting their horn a little less than your average, startup advisors. So take the time, if you can, to just skim through what it means to be regulated and keep that in mind. And I always like to say, and I think it's a little hard for people to think about this, but when it comes down to it, what is the point of a regulator? Why do we exist? right? We're not there to block you. We're there to make sure that basically consumers have access to products that are essentially as safe as they could potentially be. We're not taking away all their risk. We're just risk mitigating. So whenever you think about, okay, about your product and how you're building it, always go back to first principles. How are my consumers, how are my clients going to be protected from others, but sometimes also from themselves? And if you keep asking that question over and over and over and over again, then you're thinking like a regulator. And just there and that optic and, having that idea in mind when you speak to a regulator will make all the difference.
That's really interesting. I mean, do your research is absolutely great advice no matter what, but understanding what a regulator is solving for, I think really helps you reframe, which is exactly what you've been talking to us about. So, Gabrielle, beyond sort of reframing the pitch to speak the same language as a regulator, you obviously speak to a huge number of startups, and you have over the course of your career. What are some of the common mistakes that you see them making when they come to speak to you, maybe that we didn't cover in your presentation?
I think ultimately the mistake, and in a way it's not a mistake, but it kind of is to that you have to keep in mind that the regulator and any sort of government in a way initiative from that front, we're not here to make you profitable, as to say. So that means all of the excitement and all of the sort of pump up vibes you're going to get from your investors, from your other stakeholders, from even your clients, if you're like doing B2B or things like that, all of that whoa to the moon type energy. I mean, even our conference is called, right, it's called Highway to 100 Unicorns, right? All of that will not exist in the room. And so taking all that big talk of we are the best, we are using this really high tech technology, we are better than so and so, all of that high energy speak that we love and that gets you funding is fundamentally not going to work in this situation. And I think if you remember that, it just allows you to sort of just keep in mind where you are and humble it a bit and realize, okay, I'm building this product. Why? Because there are people that would need it. Otherwise, there wouldn't be product market fit, right? So it goes in hand in hand. I just mean all the high energy speak is gonna annoy the people across the table.
Right. And I think that's a very fair concern, right? In that we really do have a huge amount of hype within our startup ecosystem. We have a lot of enthusiasm, and those are all incredible things. But when we come to translate that to regulators, whose objective, again, as you mentioned, is not to make these companies profitable, it's not to raise funding, it's to regulate these industries, protect them from bad actors, protect the consumer first and foremost. It's you're solving a different problem and you're speaking to a different audience, right? With a different. And
it doesn't
that's good.
mean we're not excited for you. I mean, it doesn't mean that. It just means that the mind is a little bit shifted in a different manner.
Okay, so Gabrielle, you sit with ADGM, right? But what advice can you give founders who are creating solutions for markets that are in multiple regulatory jurisdictions, right? How do you scale these kinds of solutions to other regulators?
That's a great question. So I feel that's something that has to be done on both sides. First, on the side of the startup, but then also on the side of the regulator. On the side of the regulator, we are trying very hard to harmonize and have regulation that makes sense at a global scale, right? At ADGM, and that's one of the reasons I was, absolutely thrilled, and why I made the leap from venture capital to regulation was because at ADGM, because we were a young jurisdiction, we were able to do our regulation from scratch. And that means there was no legacy attached to it. Because there's no legacy attached to it, it means we were able to write regulation for things that made sense for the market now. Things like virtual assets, for instance, that I mentioned before. We were able to create very hard regulation that would put it up to a high standard, which would mean that any company that gets regulated by ADGM in the virtual assets field, they will be at a standard that will essentially let them be regulated anywhere else in the world, because we looked at all the consideration, right? So we're looking to raise that regulatory standard in such a way as it works for across the world. Now, regulatory arbitrage still exists across, you're going to have different requirements, different places, But I can promise you that we as regulators are trying to work to make it seamless and make it all essentially, similar, because ultimately we all have the same priority, we all have the same goal. So it shouldn't be that different. And then from a startup perspective, unfortunately, it's not always easy. We are not the European Union. The world is not, all harmonized across. So you will have to fundamentally take the time and take the effort of going regulator to regulator. But my advice would be is if you do have, if you are choosing a first place to get regulated, choose a place where you're confident that the regulations will set you up for success in the future. I.e., don't go somewhere that you know that the regulation is a little bit, maybe a bit too lax, because then it's going to block some doors afterwards if you want to expand in different markets. Go somewhere where you're well regulated based on international best practices, so that then when you do have to go get regulated by another regulator, the effort will be much lesser.
That is a very, very important solution. And I think something that many of our fintechs at the moment, especially as they think about scale, which is the name of the game, need to think about. And I'd never really thought about whether regulators speak to each other. That's really cool. Okay, and we have time for just one or two more questions. I would be remiss if I didn't ask. So right now, I am a startup that is looking to set up in Abu Dhabi, or I'm looking to scale to Abu Dhabi, and I would like to have a conversation with the wonderful regulators over at ADGM. How do I approach that?
Well, we're not hard to find. We actually are very, very much based on industry talks. So we're happy to speak to startups who are looking to be licensed at ADGM, whether it's just registering as a corporation, or it's to be regulated under financial services. All that is open. You can go on our website, so www.adgm.com, and we have our contact details. If you're a fintech startup, you can message fintech@adgm.com. If you are, something else, another type of startups, we also have, I think it's contact@adgm.com. You can contact us, and we have players and we have people who are going to message back to you and walk you through the processes and ways to set up. So just reach out. Or you can also reach out to Hub 71, who you're going to see speak right after me. That also works.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. That was an absolutely brilliant session, and it added a huge amount of value to everyone in our audience. We're so grateful to you. We're so happy to be working with you as Microsoft for Startups and the whole team over in Abu Dhabi.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope it was useful.
It really was, and it was especially useful for me because you've helped me introduce our next speaker. Thank you.